Hello and welcome. Another edition of the Corvive College Coaches Corner. Each and every Thursday, take a few minutes, catch up with college coaches, kind of get an idea of what's current, what the environment looks like at their particular school. Today, we're going to be talking with Associate Head Coach and Recruiting Coordinator at the University of Michigan, Jake Valentine. And Jake, I want to say thank you. I know it's a busy time of year with the holidays, but I really appreciate you taking a few minutes today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Excited to get after it.
One of the things that I really would love for people to know is back in, I guess maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the Big Ten really didn't take on that persona of a baseball conference. But now, more than ever, first of all, Michigan has a historic, baseball program that's been to the World Series on several occasions. But now, with the addition of some of the West Coast, Pacific Northwest schools, obviously all the way out into the East Coast, baseball, not only at Michigan, but within the Big Ten, has taken a real big jump.
Yeah, I think it's one of the premier baseball conferences in the country right now. Um, you know, I think you have a lot of storied programs. I mean, Coach Stankiewicz and myself were actually standing on the field last year when we were playing each other. We're like, isn't this crazy? It's a conference game. Yeah, adding USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, it's been a great addition to an already strong baseball conference. But now I think it's an elite baseball conference.
So I would love for you to share, a lot of people have a perception of, obviously they see Ann Arbor with regard to football and basketball, but talk a little bit about what makes the campus so enticing and such a great experience for a student with regard to the community and obviously the campus.
Yeah, I think it just you're surrounded by excellence every single day from a student body and an alumni base. And so I think there's something special about it. Everybody always asks me about it, and I just try to explain to them that it's just different. Um, it's any type of year, it's, top three in the country from a public education standpoint. But then what's unique to the town itself is the town is kind of built around the campus. And so it's really ingrained, which I think that's why when you have really good athletics, really good academics, and then the social scene, I think that's why it gets, top five, college town in the country every single year or something along those lines. It's just really unique.
One of the topics now that kind of is discussed at length is the role of the high school athlete. When you ask coaches, obviously there's always going to be a component to each and every recruiting class with regard to the high school athlete. But my question is more, how do you go about your recruiting now? Is it still have a travel ball element? Has it shifted now more towards your camps? How are you, or more importantly, when are you beginning to evaluate the high school athlete with regard to your recruiting class on a year by year basis?
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head with that last sentence. It's definitely more of a year by year basis, but I think you're trying to build for the next couple years. So, right now, the hot class right now is the 27s, obviously finishing up that class. And so the camps are definitely geared around, the remaining 27s, 28s, getting some eyes on some 29s, because that's the only way we can build relationships with them now currently is through the camp. And I think when you look at comparatively across the country, we try to price ours so that it's attainable for most families because we do use it as a recruiting source. Um, we've had a lot of luck out of our camps, and I think more than anything, we just want to get to know them on a more personal level. Kind of see how they're going to react because it's not something to brag about. But if they do end up coming to campus, we're going to spend more time with them than we do even our own kids. So we got to make sure that relationship is tight and, the fit. I know that's kind of a buzzword in today's recruiting world, but it's true. Like you got to find the fit.
When am talking with families and we talk about that dynamic as far as a fit academically, geographically, personalities are a big part of that. Talk a little bit about why that's important at a camp because you're kind of seeing a student athlete for an extended period of time, but in your dugout, on your campus. You see how they interact with other campers, obviously, but more importantly, how they interact with your staff and possibly some of your current student athletes. So, from your perspective now, has camps really kind of made that leap to, I wouldn't use the word critical. I don't think anything is critical necessarily, but an important component to your recruiting process as far as not only evaluating, but getting to know a little bit deeper student athletes on a non athletic level?
Absolutely. I think the relationship building piece, because everything's kind of been pushed to later, um, to where the actual recruitment piece happens really fast now.
Right.
With the August 1st deadline and September 1st for the getting on campus, I think it's kind of a sprint at that point. And so like the actual relationship and the quote unquote dating period is more during the camp setting than anything now. So yeah, I think we talk about this all the time is nobody, no matter who they are, knows how they're going to react when they're surrounded by players that are as good or better than them. And so I think the more that we can see how they do interact with those type of people around them, it gives us a little bit better view of, are they going to fold up shop? And then the other part is we get to have a little bit of a, you know, conversation with the parents too to kind of figure out. I mean, they're going to try to put their best hat on, but we're going to try to dig through that and see what the message is actually going to be coming from home, because that's just as important, because no matter how good they are, at some point it's going to get tough. And when they
Oh, yeah.
call home, is it, hey, let's get you out of there, or is it, hey man, dig your heels in and let's get after this thing? So that's just as important as finding out what the message is going to be, at home.
One of the, uh, I think, missing pieces, or there's a disconnect between the realities of college baseball and the skill set requirements and, the high school summer slash travel world. Can you talk about, not so much from a metric perspective, but some of the skill sets that separate athletes and kind of get on your radar, over and above the velocity or the exit velocity, some of the things that stick out to you when you're going to evaluate a potential student athlete?
Yeah, I think a couple pieces like foot speed, because I think speed is such an important part of the game these days, and then overall strength. I think when you look at a true high end prospect on the high school comparative to somebody that's a starter in your everyday lineup, or even a portal guy that you're considering, or whatever, is a lot of times the overall skill or ceiling of that human being is not that far apart. It's just the overall strength. Like, are they ready to contribute at an expedited rate, with the way that college baseball has created from you got to be old, you got to be physical ASAP. Um, I think finding those guys that are fringe draft guys from a physicality standpoint, and then on top of it too is like, how do they work? So how quick is the growth going to come, or is it going to be more of a gradual standard? Because I think we've all talked about that, like, hey man, this guy's going to, like, for instance, a lot of the guys up north, right, sometimes their floor is a little bit lower but their ceiling's a lot higher, where vice versa, if you're in the warm weather, maybe the floor is a lot higher but the ceiling's a lot lower. So it's trying to figure out exactly which route you want to go with each position. But from a purely skill set standpoint, I think a lot of it has to do with foot speed, hand speed, and then overall physicality. I think a lot of the other stuff we can really develop, but it's hard to really teach speed. It's hard to really teach strength. We can get better at everything else, though.
And we talk about the strength piece, and I think a lot of parents kind of feel like the high school athletes getting gypped or slighted. And I try to explain it at, maturation during the ages of 19 through say 22 is just a natural part of growth within older teenagers becoming young adults. As way back in the day, you'd see a skinny young freshman and then graduate with 30 pounds of just natural physical maturation with or without the weight room. Talk a little bit about the workload at the college level as opposed to high school. I think a lot of parents are and a lot of student athletes are under the impression that, oh, I play at a 6A school in Texas or California or Florida. I play with dudes all the time. Well, those dudes are not who you're really competing with. You're competing with, somebody that might be 23, 24, and you're a 20-year-old, shortstop or pitcher. Just talk about the separator there with regard to man strength versus older teenager strength.
Yeah, I think it's funny because that's usually the and it's funny because I interrupt parents sometimes on the recruiting visits with this, but that's something a lot of the parents bring up is like, "Hey, you've never seen a harder worker than my son." And it's like, no, I don't disagree that he's probably the hardest worker you've ever seen, but we have a locker room of 35 of them that are all already working that hard and already understand, you know, because the other piece that gets lost in it on the college standpoint is it's not only the physical in the gym, it's not only the time spent in the cages on their own and on the field, but then they also have about 6 to 7 hours a day that's spent on coursework. It's funny. I was talking to our first rounder, Mitch Voigt. He comes back and trains over here, and I was like, "Hey, man, what was the biggest difference? Like, did you feel prepared? Did you feel, because we're always trying to help make sure that transition's really good for them." And he said on the baseball side, he was probably overly prepared. He said, but the biggest piece is he didn't realize how much class took out of him, and how much bigger his motor was from a work component once class wasn't involved, to where he was just focusing on baseball from a day-to-day standpoint. And you can see it. I mean, just he was already crazy physical, but like, um, his reps became higher and more regular. And I think when you look at high school guys coming in, that's the biggest piece that, and then it's a next separator when you go to pro ball. But I think that's the hard part for the young guys is it's not it's not the actual at the baseball practice workload, because I think if they're really elite, they're probably used to something comparable to that. But it's the hours of extra work that they do on their own. It's the extra one or two lifts a week to make sure they're catching up. On top of that, it's the extra, ground balls off a machine or whatever. It's it's the entirety of it. That really kind of hits them in the face. And so I think what we try to talk to the young guys when they're coming in is like, don't kill yourself trying to get there. Like, just be in the best shape and healthiest shape you can be by the time you get here, because we'll take care of helping you guide through the rest. Because the number one most important tool is availability.
Amen.
And so we got to make sure we help them blend that. So I think parents get scared of it, but I think it, like you said, it's a pretty natural maturation process from a physicality. And then you see the guys that take the next step, and really start to make it a job, if you will. And I use that loosely because I don't want them to view it as like not fun or anything, because it's the most enjoyable thing on the planet, but it's just the regularity of which they do it. Because we're bound by a lot of NCAA rules that really limits the amount of time that we can physically be with them, and so a lot of the big changes are built by just what they do when nobody's watching. Um,
So true. One of the things that I think is really a separator for you as a coach. You've been around college athletes, whether it's at Pullman, Washington State, or Portland, and I really think people, when they start to think of college, with regard to being a student athlete, they miss the part of ultimately that team almost becomes as important as your family at home. They become kind of like your family, your fraternity, your roommates, in good times and bad, in good times, health and sickness and so forth. That 4 or 5 year period is really forging relationships for life. And can you talk a little bit about that component to being a college student athlete, regardless of the level? Being a college athlete and part of a team is probably the last frontier for most athletes with regard to team sports, team unity, and that family dynamic where you're basically together almost 10, 11 months a year, almost every single day for a large amount of time.
Yeah, I think that's the most beautiful part about college athletics is the relationships that are forged and built in a very formative time in a lot of these young men's lives. A lot of them first time away, um, first time having to do stuff on their own, and to see the growth and helping them guide them through how to build those relationships and how to maintain those relationships, because we talk about it all the time, but these guys in that locker room, those are going to be the best men in your wedding. Those are going to
Amen.
be
Right.
those are going to be the guys that you do that summer trip with every single year. You're forging relationships that are going to completely change the trajectory of your future life. And so making sure that that locker room is incredibly healthy is, I think it's the most important piece, because um, there's a lot of talent in college baseball, and there's a lot of teams that have incredible talent that don't make it as far as maybe they could, because maybe their locker room just isn't as healthy, and then vice versa. You see, the Murray States of the world that
Right.
their locker room is just so incredibly close, that it takes them even further. And we talk about it from a growth standpoint, is when you're with somebody that amount of time, that regular, I think back to like siblings, right? Like, you're gonna hate each other at some point, but you're also gonna love and respect each other at the same time. And so teaching them that, hey man, brothers fight, but ultimately brothers love each other. And you know, when you get done, nobody remembers if you went 3 for 4 in that game or anything like that. Everything they remember was, were you a good human being, and were you a good teammate? Like, that's the things that come back, because a lot of times the stories and everything, a lot of it's like making fun of us coaches for something we did to them or whatever, which is great. Impersonations of us, but then also like bringing back, man, remember when we used to do those 6 a.m. workouts and we were puking all over the place? Those were the best times ever. Like, and I think that's what sometimes get lost in a transactional world of baseball. And I think that's the unique piece, is um, when you surround yourself with a bunch of coaches that want to be, transformational, you get a lot more fulfillment on the relationships that you're able to forge and you're able to build and you're able to guide. Because, I'm a father, and I want to make sure that the the impact that I leave them, I hope that in 10 years they'll look back and be appreciative of what I did for them. Not saying that they're going to be my buddy or anything like that, but they know that I'm going to be truthful to them, and they might hate me for a week, but I'd rather them hate me for a week than hate me forever by being lied to. And I think that's what our job is to make sure we're helping them forge those relationships and make sure they understand how important. And sorry, I went off a tangent, but I do think this is
No,
the most important
I,
thing with college baseball.
I agree 1,000%, and I think it's a missing most I don't think we talk about it enough with regard to everybody's worried about where am I going to hit, what uniform number am I going to get, are you going to develop me, what about pro ball? Whoa, college is about, a time in your life you'll never ever get back, and it's about relationships that literally last a lifetime. And I think it's critical for us to bring that topic up for parents that are looking into college opportunities. And one of the topics now that is always at the forefront when I'm talking with parents is portal. How do we compete with the portal? And I always try to get parents to understand the sooner that you raise the level of competition, your level of strength training. In other words, you can get comfortable in a high school environment because your peer group is 19 to 15, but in college you're literally competing with men. So how do you, like, what types of words of wisdom would you, if you're 20, 27, 28, I guess even 29s, if we're being in the high school, if we're being inclusive, what would you give them for advice to prepare on how to compete, to really, be ready for whatever level of college they may aspire to play at? What can they do maybe differently that they might not be doing now in order to be the best version of themselves when it's time to go to college?
Yeah, I think there's probably two statements I would say right off the bat, and make sure your aspirations match your work. And so like
Bingo.
if you yeah, if you to if you want to be a Division 1 player, at 8, 9 o'clock at night, that your parents shouldn't see you on the Xbox or the PlayStation, you know, working on Call of Duty or something like that. Like, that what was really cool for us interaction, we took our guys to the Dominican Republic last year over Thanksgiving break, and obviously giving them perspective on how special they have everything, that was great. But I think the other part too is they see their competition from a professional standpoint and realize these guys are living, breathing, doing anything they can to get there. And I think it kind of jump started a couple guys. And then to answer your question, the second part is worry about yourself. And
Bingo.
what I mean by that is, like, who cares what's going on in the portal? Who cares what, Jimmy and Johnny are doing over here? Like, if you want to be the best version of yourself, the only person you got to worry about is yourself. And I think when people stop worrying about all the stuff around them and just have a little bit better, windshield mentality, I think that takes guys a little bit further, um, than anything else. I mean, I think you know, going into that is like there's high school guys are just as important for playing every day. I think age is not an indicator of playing time. I think it's the how they present themselves, how they go about it. Are they ready to go? I know there's going to be a learning curve, especially that freshman and fall, but there's a learning curve with portal guys that first fall too, because it's a completely different environment. It's just how quickly can you erase the noise around you, and how quickly can you just focus on getting better every single day from a personal standpoint.
Last question, and I really want to get your perspective on this. I often try to tell athletes, especially in that 16 to 19 window, about the importance of nutrition slash their eating habits. And everybody looks at me like, what does that have to do with baseball? And so I know, especially at Michigan or any Big Ten school for that matter, strength coaches, nutrition coaches, you have all sorts of ancillary coaching staff members. But can you just provide kind of a snapshot of University of Michigan, the cafeteria, the meal plan, the strength coaches stressing to the athletes, hey man, you got to get more food in you, you got to get more protein. Just talk a little bit about that. Just, hey, when you get here, you better know that you have to put the gas in the engine, and you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to hydrate, and all of that is critical, just as critical as lessons or repetitions in a cage.
Yeah, I mean, the old adage when those kids would, myself included. This is not. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but like it's just really hard for me to gain weight. Then you're not working hard enough at it. It's literally there's tricks to it, right? Like, maybe you have to eat. Maybe you have to continue to eat like you normally are, but then you need to add a PB&J after every single meal.
Right.
Or maybe you need to take a different type of protein. Maybe you need to take more of like a casein protein that's slow developing at night, to help stick to you. So I think that's the unique part for us at our level is, we have a lot of people that are even more informed, than we are on that. So if there is an issue, they can go to them and help. I mean, I look at, Sam Brown, that was with me at Washington State with the Nationals right now, and he transformed his body. He put on 22 pounds, and that was his sophomore fall. And really changed, the overall strength and the overall draft type that he was. But yeah, eating, you're never going to get the amount of gains that you really want from a baseball perspective if you're not putting the correct fuel into the car. Like, Coach Loomis at University of Portland used to always say, "Hey, are you gonna fuel your body like a Pinto, or are you gonna fuel your body like a Ferrari?" And because ultimately your engine's gonna run off what you're putting into it. And so, in college, right, like the adage of, ramen noodles and all that type of stuff, that ain't gonna fly because you're gonna
Right.
you're gonna lose all kinds of weight, right away. And the caloric intake and what kind of calories you're putting in are just as important. I think the other piece too that gets lost in is not just the food that you're putting into your body, but learning how to make that food. Uh,
Right.
because as much of the additions that we have, like all the extra food they get and all the different things, like ultimately when they get home though, like if they want to continue to eat clean and continue to grow from a professional standpoint physically, like they're gonna have to learn, like, hey man, you gotta learn how to make rice, you gotta learn how to make grilled chicken, and you better learn how to steam some broccoli just to start off. If you can do those three things, you're gonna be in a good starting point every single night. But yeah, I think you hit on the head. It's You could do all the work, all the physical work from a throwing program or a hitting program or a lifting program, but you're not going to see any of those gains if what you're putting into your system, before and after doesn't match, where you're trying to go. And it gets back to what we were talking about, right? Like, you just have to make sure your actions match your aspirations. And like, if you want to be a dude, you got to eat like a dude.
So
And
true.
it just is what it is. And I think that's it. It comes off as super simple, but I think that's our job as coaches is to create a simple, mindset to get, not simple things.
Well, I want to remind parents, athletes, everything about, Coach Valentine, Coach Smith, the University of Michigan, whether it has to do with camps, game schedule, and they play a tremendous in and out of conference schedule. I know this year you're opening up in Arizona. You got Florida State. I mean, you get some big boys, Louisville. It's a big boy schedule in a big boy world, and so anything that you want to find out with regard to the upcoming camps, whether it's over the summer or in the fall, all that will be in the baseball blue book. All of the coaches from the University of Michigan are in the baseball blue book, and so should you. Coach Valentine, I want to say thank you. Happy holidays to you and your family, and I really, truly appreciate you taking the time today to speak with us and kind of share some insight about University of Michigan baseball.
I appreciate your time. Appreciate you having me, and go blue.
That was all.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice because it matters what you put in your body.